Welcome to the debate. Today, we're diving into a really tough situation, the aftermath of sophisticated financial scams, specifically focusing on the victims of Ghazala Din. We're talking about people like Priya, who lost, $15,000, and others who lost staggering amounts, even six figures. The fallout wasn't just financial, it was deeply psychological. Guilt, shattered trust, immense personal strain, like we saw with Adam's marriage. And the really difficult part here is how the scam often worked. It exploited trust, presented as investments or loans, meaning victims technically gave her the money willingly. Legally, that leaves them stuck, often with no proof. So the core question we're grappling with is, when the courts can't help, what's the most meaningful way forward? Is it collective external action, getting the story out there, or is it really about individual internal recovery? My position is that collective action and public exposure are, essential here.
Right, and that's a really potent framing of how the system can fail people. I absolutely get the drive for victims to seek some kind of external justice, some validation. But from my perspective, the focus has to be on individual resilience, on that deep internal psychological repair. That's the only truly reliable path to genuine sustainable recovery, especially when you hit that bleak realization, like Adam did, that you'll probably never pay anything back. Shifting energy inward becomes almost a survival mechanism.
Okay. I see the logic in protecting one's internal state, definitely. But what the source material really highlights for me is just how paralyzing that isolated shame can be. Priya, for instance, was initially just racked with guilt, feeling completely responsible because she vouched for Ghazala. That changed, didn't it? The moment she connected with the United for Truth group, that isolation started to break down. So external mobilization, organizing, getting a news channel involved, it functions almost like an antidote to that shame. It builds a shared understanding that says, you weren't foolish, you were betrayed. When the law offers nothing, this kind of group solidarity, this pursuit of public accountability, it's frankly the only real power they have left.
That's certainly a compelling read on Priya's experience, yeah. But I think we need to maybe dig a bit deeper into the nature of the damage. While group support undeniably offers comfort, maybe even surface relief, the core injury, the sleepless nights Priya had, Adam's strained marriage, that fundamental shattering of trust, that's intensely personal. It's internal. And fighting an external battle against someone like Din, who's elusive, it risks keeping victims stuck in that anxious cycle, potentially prolonging the stress. Real recovery, I believe, involves the psychological heavy lifting, truly accepting the loss, as painful as that is, and then, crucially, rebuilding trust in oneself, in others. Constantly fighting this external fight might actually distract from or even delay that vital internal work.
But I worry that focusing only on internal repair essentially lets the perpetrator off the hook, doesn't it? Justice here, it's not just punitive, right? It's also about recognition, about making sure this isn't just swept under the rug. Getting the media involved, finding strength and solidarity, that ensures Ghazala's actions aren't forgotten. It creates a kind of public accountability, even if there's no courtroom verdict. That sustained pressure, that's a form of justice too. It pushes back against that feeling of being silenced.
But we have to weigh the emotional toll of pinning hopes on an external outcome that, let's be honest, is highly unlikely given the no-proof problem. For someone who's lost six figures, chasing that external accountability, especially when it keeps hitting dead ends, can become a kind of secondary trauma. It's just emotionally draining. And what happens if that group action, that media push, ultimately fails to deliver tangible results, which, given the legal issues, is a real possibility? It could lead to an even deeper sense of hopelessness, maybe more withdrawal than if they'd focused earlier on, say, cognitive tools or therapy to manage the immense guilt and anxiety directly.
Okay, but think about that intense guilt Priya felt, specifically the shame of having vouched for Ghazala. That's fundamentally a relational wound. Doesn't it require a relational cure? Finding common ground, a shared purpose with others who went through the exact same manipulation, that directly counteracts that feeling of unique personal failure.
The collective experience, it becomes essential in dissolving that individual burden, replacing it with shared resolve and a clearer picture of the systemic nature of the betrayal.
That solidarity absolutely helps. I don't dispute that it eases the immediate pain, but the deep scarring, it often manifests as profound relational damage. Look at Adam, that shattered trust fueling his anxiety, the strain on his marriage. Healing that level of damage requires dedicated internal work, often with professional help, to rebuild stability, reestablish boundaries. Recovery ultimately means feeling safe enough to trust again, and I'd argue that staying immersed in the high-stress environment of a public fight can make that necessary inner work incredibly difficult, maybe almost impossible for some.
I understand the emphasis on internal healing. I really do. But ultimately, finding that shared purpose, that collective voice, gives victims the leverage they need to combat the sheer helplessness they feel when the system offers nothing. It's necessary, I think, to reframe the narrative away from personal failing and towards recognizing the betrayal for what it was.
And while that external support provides crucial morale, I still believe the ultimate measure of recovery lies within the individual, their ability to heal those deep foundational wounds, the shattered self-trust, the damaged relationships. And that healing needs to happen somewhat independently of whether the external fight for justice succeeds or fails in the long run.
It seems clear the complexity of scams like this really underscores that recovery isn't an either-or situation. It really highlights the need to understand both the push for external redress and public accountability, and at the same time, the critical importance of dedicated internal repair after such a devastating personal and financial blow.